What would you do if your 22-year-old daughter suddenly stopped answering your phone calls? Her phone goes straight to voicemail, your texts don't deliver. Well, Gabby Petito's mother did what any concerned parent would do. She reached out to Gabby's fiance, who she was on the road trip with, about her daughter's whereabouts. Brian Laundrie, Gabby Petito's fiance, didn't answer either. And this is when Gabby's mother started panicking. And when Gabby's mother tried calling again, she realized that she had been blocked, which obviously raised concern. Today's case is one of the most disturbing true crime cases. It is obviously very infamous. I'm sure you have heard about it. And it is the tragic case of Gabby Petito. Hi, I'm Michelle. Welcome back to Betrayal Files. I feel like the goal of this channel is to have a really good combination of both true crime cases that are not talked about enough, and then also, of course, talking about some of the most popular true crime cases of all time and kind of the conspiracy theories behind them, our thought process. I think obviously all of it is important. Earlier in the week, I did a less well-known case about Angie Diaz, so you could check that out if you want to, but today we are hitting one of the biggest true crime cases of all time, Gabby Petito. Gabby and Brian Laundrie were online content creators, so I think that's why this story hits kind of home for me. I do think there's something dark about the fact that their life seems so picture perfect, even though obviously it wasn't, and any van life couple kind of makes it seem like that. And it really just shows you that we really do not know what's going on beyond social media. And as somebody who's been on YouTube for the last 10 years, I could tell you that most of what you see is curated. That's life. Gabrielle Petito was born on March 19th of 1999 in Blue Point, New York, which is basically a suburb on Long Island. It's one of those quiet towns where nothing really goes wrong, you know, kids riding their bikes, families, people walking their dogs. So it's scary that one of the most famous true crime cases ever came from this small town. Gabby really stood out in her town. She was very artsy and creative. She was just that kind of warm, sweet girl that everyone knew and everyone absolutely loved. She was the oldest of 6 children in a blended family, and by all accounts, her family was really, really close. She was close to her father's side and her father's new family, and then also her mother remarried, and she was close with those siblings and stepfather as well. Both Nicole Schmidt and Joseph Petito were very present in Gabby's life, even though they were no longer a couple. Her mom, Nicole, remarried a man named Jim, and her dad ended up remarrying a woman named Tara, and Gabby didn't do the whole step label thing. Like, to her, family was just family. She genuinely loved her family, and they all honestly spent a lot of time together. Gabby growing up loved painting, loved being out in nature. She loved butterflies. I'm sure you've seen the classic picture of Gabby Petito when she was missing. The most used picture was, of course, her in front of this butterfly mural. I believe it is her last picture she ever posted to Instagram. And Gabby's family would tell you themselves that Gabby was just this soft, sweet soul who saw the beauty in everything. In high school on Long Island, this is where Gabby met Brian Laundrie. However, they were just good friends at the time and they hadn't started dating until after high school. But to really understand what happened here later, we're gonna need to talk about who Brian Laundrie actually was. So Brian Christopher Laundrie, according to people who actually knew him in high school, claimed that he was kind of a loner, but not in like that quiet, mysterious, or misunderstood way that like people kind of romanticize. One of his classmates literally said that the first time they saw him, another kid pointed him out and said, "That's a narc." That's an undercover cop. Like, no one trusted him for whatever reason, and obviously for good reason at the end of the day. But nonetheless, he was kind of a loner in high school and didn't really have a lot of friends. He also looked a lot older than anyone else in his grade. Like, he was looking like he was 30 years old at 16. So I think that is why people thought he was like an undercover cop, or that was kind of a rumor that was spread. But nonetheless, he kind of just gave off this energy of like closed off, quiet, and kind of weird. I feel like he really wanted to come across as this like deep, philosophical, mysterious guy. And then when you actually like looked at his artwork, like his writing, it was really cryptic and weird. Like, he wrote something like, "Crying, I don't have emotions, I'm deprogramming." Like, what does that even fucking mean? So Gabby and Brian reconnected after high school, and by early 2019, the two were officially together. Like every couple that is clearly not perfect on the inside, they are portraying an image on the outside on social media that they are the perfect happy couple. They're so cute. They're posting these pictures, these vlogs, and they're traveling together, they're hiking, cuddling, and like just talking about their future. Their comment section is literally filled with people referring to them as couple goals. Like, it's just one of those classic online relationships that you don't actually know what's going on behind closed doors. In July of 2019, Gabby makes a huge decision to move from New York, where she had her family and everyone that she knew, all the way to Northport, Florida, which is where Brian and his parents had moved after he was done with high school. So now she was living with Brian, his mother Roberta Laundrie, and his father Christopher Laundrie. So Brian and Gabby are living together in Florida, and she ends up getting a job at Publix as a pharmacy technician. Brian also works at Publix at this point, which again, not that surprising. I feel like if you grew up in Florida, you know, I know like 80 people who worked at Publix at one point. Although people try to use this as like a weird point that he was trying to always stay close to her, which may be true, but I feel like that's not that weird in relationships, but I'm not sure. But obviously his intentions were not pure at all. Gabby also starts working at Taco Bell at this time because she's trying to pick up these extra shifts so that she and Brian could save money for their van trip that they plan on going on. Gabby loved watching all of these different van life YouTubers. She really wanted that to be her life. She wanted them to be a couple on YouTube traveling around the world and just taking in all the scenery that the earth has to offer, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a very outdoorsy person, obviously. I feel like you could just tell that by looking at me, but nonetheless, that was Gabby's dream. So Brian did not like that Gabby started picking up these extra shifts at Taco Bell. He would text her like really creepy things like, "I'll be so happy to see you when I see you, but right now I'm so pissed. Like, I hate that you work at Taco Bell with all those low lives." Like, what kind of fucking loser are you to just like be like that and judge like that? I don't know. It's just, he obviously had a gross energy and clearly wanted to control Gabby to some extent. He even wrote to her, "I don't know why you had to turn into one of them. Disgusting." Which, like, literally, who the fuck raised you? Which we'll talk about a little bit later because his parents, crazy. Brian is so weird. He literally calls Gabby's mother and tells Nicole that Gabby is hanging out with really weird people at work, which is obviously such a red flag because there was no, like, truth behind this statement. She was literally just coexisting with her coworkers and they were perfectly fine, normal people who were just working a job. And this is like a really big red flag because at that point, he's not only trying to control her, but he's trying to control how other people see her, which is really a red flag. He starts sending some weird shit like, "Oh, I care about you so much. I love you so much. I hate that I love the person I hate so much." Like, girl, what the fuck? He's so dramatic. I can't. He was very much like love bombing, but also mixing that with control issues and isolation. It was just standard manipulation tactics to the textbook. So Gabby confided in her best friend, Rose Davis, during this time, and she showed some of the text messages that Brian was sending to her and told her some of the things that Brian was doing. And Rose obviously was just like, "No, this guy's controlling. He's weird. There's something, this is a red flag." But ultimately, one night when Gabby and Rose were supposed to go line dancing together, like a literal girls' night, nothing crazy, Gabby didn't arrive on time, and 30 minutes go by, an hour goes by, so on and so forth, and finally Rose gets a text and Gabby is hysterical. She's crying and she's trying to explain what happened, but Brian basically took her ID and hid her wallet so that she couldn't go to this line dancing like bar, essentially, which is so crazy and so fucked up. That is just clearly him trying to control the situation and control her, which obviously never goes well. So I feel like a lot of girlies, like me and all my friends use like Find My iPhone and Find My Friends to like share our locations. It's just good for safety purposes to have people knowing where you are. When Brian found out that Gabby and Rose were sharing each other's locations, which again, completely normal thing for our friends to do, he made her delete the app and delete Rose or anyone from her Find My iPhone, which is obviously just, again, that sense of control that he's clearly portraying. But Gabby did not really follow anyone's like advice here. She loved Brian so much and she really wanted that perfect life together, and she thought that she could probably fix him and, you know, make things better, but obviously that did not end up being the case. And in July of 2020, Brian proposes to Gabby, and it's not something big and over the top. It's a very chill engagement. They're out hiking, he pops the question, and she of course says yes, and as she says yes, she claims that a butterfly landed on her hand, which of course just felt, I guess, serendipitous to Gabby. So the two of them got engaged. They didn't want to rush into a wedding. They were obviously still young, but they wanted to like have a long engagement and build a life together first. So basically they buy this 2012 Ford Transit Connect van and they turn it into this tiny home on wheels. Gabby's paintings are all inside. It's like aesthetically pleasing, warm lights, cozy. And this is when they start their YouTube channel called Nomadic Static, which the whole idea was to travel across the country together, document everything, and basically turn it into a career. She wanted to be an influencer really bad. Like, that was her dream. She wanted to be a travel blogger. And I love that she really was trying to go after these goals. She was working incredibly hard to make her dreams come true, and she had to work at Taco Bell and Publix and all these other places just to be able to afford the van. And Brian is just like being a loser in the corner. I don't know. But ultimately, she finally made her dream happen, which must have been so exciting. So in June of 2021, they decide to start this cross-country road trip. They start in Blue Point because Gabby's brother was graduating high school, so they went to the high school graduation, and unfortunately, this would be the last time that Gabby ever saw her family. The first few weeks of the trip truly felt like a dream come true, okay? Gabby was so excited. She was posting on social media over and over again at all of the different national parks that the two of them ended up at. Everything seemed so perfect. If you just like scroll through her social media, you really believe that they had this like beautiful life together. And I think probably a lot of it was Gabby trying to like overcompensate for the way that Brian would act, because he was clearly just a huge red flag. I mean, I'm sure they had their good moments together, but obviously behind the camera, there was a lot of stuff going on that they weren't posting on social media. So I think the concept of the two of them being enclosed in this very small space is probably what led them to fight as much as they did in those weeks where they were on this road trip. Because if obviously you put anyone in a small space together for weeks, and especially if one of them's already controlling and annoying and jealous, like it's just like not going to be the cute road trip that you were hoping for, you know? So Brian was like weird as fuck. He liked to specifically like hike around barefoot, which is just like weird. Like it was a grounding thing for him. Or whatever, but he hiked around barefoot. He would go out on these hikes and then he would come home and not like get in the shower and not even wash his feet off and just like get into the bed. And this absolutely sent Gabby. She did struggle with OCD, and as an OCD girly, I can only imagine that must have been so difficult and like stressed her out to an absurd level, but it did create real tension between them. And I feel like it sounds like a small thing, but when you're in a space with someone like that and they're not even respecting it a little bit, it's just not a good sign. On August 12th of 2021, a witness is seen driving past the Moonflower Community Cooperative in Moab, Utah, and they see something that doesn't sit right with them. So they call 911 and basically report that they see a disturbance between a couple.
Grant County Sheriff's Office.
Hi, I'm calling. I'm right on the corner of Main Street by Moonflower, and we're driving by, and I'd like to report a domestic dispute.
What were they doing?
We drove by, and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
Okay, you said it's a white van? What kind of white van?
It was a smaller van. The make was a Ford. Model was Transit. Black ladder on the passenger side. White Ford Transit.
White Ford Transit. All right, I will let somebody know. Thank you.
So let's take into account that this person reporting claims that the gentleman, so Brian Laundrie, was slapping Gabby across the face. Yet somehow what happens next is such proof of people do not listen to women until they are dead. And that's honestly the very fucked up reality of it. So the cops end up pulling over the van, and this is where I'm sure you have seen the police body cam footage of Gabby Petito. And I cannot believe that the police decided to go about this the way that they did. I truly think they must feel so guilty every day, because this was clearly a moment that needed to be flagged, and they didn't do their job at the end of the day. So on the body cam footage, Gabby is inconsolable. She's crying. She can barely talk. She's covered in tears, red face, everything. And she keeps on apologizing and kind of goes on to explain the domestic fight between her and Brian.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just some days I have really bad OCD, and I was just cleaning and straightening up the back of the van before, and I was apologizing to him and saying, I'm sorry that I'm so mean, because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I just get really frustrated. Not like mean towards him, I just like, I guess my vibe is like, I hear him be like in a bad mood. And I was just saying, I'm sorry.
And if you look at the difference here between Gabby and Brian in this scenario, Brian's calm. He's just sitting there kind of like, again, being his kind of loner ass self.
Sometimes I try and really distance myself from her, so like I locked the car and I walked away from her. What happened this morning is that she's trying to start up like her own little website blog and everything, so I give her time. And we really had a nice morning and everything, but
and not really doing anything, while Gabby is clearly having a very emotional reaction to what's going on, and yet the cops, I like still can't believe they did this. Basically, the officers notice that there are some scratches on Brian's face, so they take pictures of them, they check his body for marks, they treat him like he is the victim the whole time. Gabby has a cut on her face from him grabbing her, but nobody cares about that, and she even took a picture of it earlier because there was blood in near her eye, and the officers can see that she's hurt. And the officers like ask her, but did he hit you though? And I don't know why that is even a question when the couple that called in the domestic disturbance for the first place clearly said that Brian had slapped Gabby and they saw it happen. So I just don't understand how this went so horribly wrong. Allegedly, the officers never got the message that the original caller claimed that Gabby was slapped by Brian. I don't know if I necessarily believe that, to be honest. I really don't, because I just feel like them deciding that Gabby is the primary aggressor is so crazy. Like, in any scenario, what the hell are you doing? And like just treating Brian like a victim to the point where they then get him a hotel room for the night so that they can like be separate for the night, cool off, and let Gabby, a tiny 23-year-old girl, sleep by herself in a van. Like, that is so beyond crazy. And literally this hotel room that Brian Laundrie was set up with was paid for by a domestic violence organization. Crazy. Absolutely crazy, when obviously we all know what happens next. It's just upsetting that the police clearly missed something here, and I feel like it was very obvious in the body cam footage. Again, I guess I don't know what it's like to be an officer and in that scenario, but I do feel like siding with the man on a domestic violence case where she also has blood on her, and the call, and of course just in general, like not setting her up in the hotel and setting him up is just like a bonkers response. And I just think it's so sad because obviously they had this chance to separate them and like report this to their families or something, and none of what happens next would have happened if the officers caught on to Brian Laundrie's lies. So 5 days after this domestic dispute that they have, Brian does something strange. He gets on a plane in Salt Lake City and flies back to Florida alone, leaving Gabby behind in a hotel, the Fairfield Inn, near the Salt Lake City airport. He just leaves her there with no explanation. Apparently he needed to go back and close a storage unit to save money, which whatever the fuck that means. Like, your parents are literally there. Why can't they do that for you? I don't know. So for the first time in months, Gabby is now alone. No one's watching her every move. Brian's not there. And on August 22nd, she actually ended up reaching out to her ex-boyfriend. His name is Jax. And she sends him a message saying, "Hi, I'm sure I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I'd really love to talk to you. I'm only alone until tomorrow." I'm only alone until tomorrow. It's obviously very sad knowing what happens next, but Jackson ended up calling her. They had a talk, and he later tells investigators that Gabby actually had a plan to leave Brian. She didn't know how she was going to do it yet. She was kind of like, obviously her life was super intertwined with his. She lived with his family. And I do feel like this was such a clear cry for help. Obviously, I don't blame like this kid as much as I blame the officers, but it is unfortunate, obviously, that no one could anticipate what would happen next. So on August 23rd, Brian comes back, and on August 24th, the next day, they both end up leaving the hotel together, and they start driving towards Wyoming, toward the Grand Teton National Park, and everything on the outside looks normal. On August 25th, Gabby calls her mom, and she sounds happy. She says that they're camping near a place called Spread Creek, and that the service is really bad, so she might not hear from her for a couple of days, but then they're heading to Yellowstone, and nothing sounds urgent or wrong. Like, everything literally sounds normal and okay, and that same day is when she posts her final Instagram photo, which is, of course, the infamous photo we were talking about earlier of her standing in front of the butterfly mural. She's smiling, she looks so happy, and everything looks perfect. But obviously that's not the case, because on August 27th of 2021, this is the day that everything changed. That afternoon around 3 p.m., Gabby and Brian took a walk into a Tex-Mex restaurant in Jackson, Wyoming called Mary Piglet's. And at first everything seemed normal, but then something just shifts. Multiple witnesses inside of the restaurant notice that there's something off between them. Two witnesses, Nina and Matt, ended up coming forward later when Gabby was missing, and they described Brian as completely losing control. He started yelling at the hostess, at the staff members. He's angry about something, and he's apparently demanding a refund, and he's just like not acting like a normal person, basically. And then obviously once Gabby was missing, this later became a concern, like, hey, I just saw this guy and he was acting like a lunatic. Gabby is apologizing to the waitstaff, crying, and the witnesses claim that she was just sitting outside crying because she was so embarrassed of the scene that Brian had caused. But also, like, I think that goes for itself, but also I think that speaks for itself, that something going on here was a lot darker than what it seemed on the surface. So at 2:14 p.m., they are seen on security footage in Whole Foods, and they left around 2:30 p.m. and sat in the van for about 20 minutes. And I just wonder what was said in that 20 minutes, like what was happening in that silence. They just, like, Brian just exploded and was super angry at staff, and like I'm sure Gabby was upset about that and talking about it with him. And this was obviously close to when things took a dark turn. At 2:56 p.m., the van pulls out of the parking lot and they head north on Highway 89 towards Teton National Forest. And that is the last confirmed footage of Gabby Petito alive. So this is when Brian took Gabby's life. He strangled her and hit her and basically just left her body in the middle of the forest, which is just so heartbreaking and horrible of an end. But we didn't know this at this point because she wasn't reported missing yet. But what Brian did over the next 72 hours, in my opinion, is one of the most chilling and calculated sociopathic sequences that I have ever come across, okay? Because I feel like instead of panicking or obviously like showing any sign of remorse, he immediately starts building an alibi. On August 29th, people see Brian hitchhiking alone, no van, no Gabby. A woman named Miranda Baker and her boyfriend pick him up, and he offers them $200 cash to drive him 10 miles, which is crazy, but they end up saying no to the money, and they drive him anyway. And the second that they mention that they're headed toward Jackson Hole, he panics. He demands to get out of the car immediately. And then minutes later, another woman named Norma Jean Jalovic ends up picking him up. And after leaving church, she gives him a ride towards the Spread Creek area. She even offers to take him past the gate closer to where he had been camping, and suddenly he gets like really agitated and weird. He refuses to go any farther with them, and he just gets out and says, I'm sorry. He just gets out of the car and heads to Airbnb campsite. So this was all very calculated because he clearly wanted witnesses to remember him being miles away from the van so that later when Gabby's body was eventually found, he could say like, well, it wasn't there. Like these people saw me hitchhiking, and he was kind of creating this illusion of innocence. And at the same time, the same day, he's on the phone with his mother, Roberta, for almost an hour, which we'll come back to because pretty sure she absolutely knew what was happening, because we'll get there, but come on. So over the next few days, Brian starts texting Gabby's phone to make it look like he didn't know anything was wrong, he didn't know she was missing, and that there was no issue between them. He wrote to her saying, made it to Coulter Bay, or wish you could fly the drone here. And he even texts himself pretending to be her off of her phone, which is so gross and messed up. And the cell phone data shows that those messages weren't even opened until Brian was physically back in the van with her phone in his hands. Like he was messaging himself to keep the timeline alive, and it's so disturbing. And then he also starts sending texts to Gabby's mom. And this was where things started to gain concern, because on August 27th, he sends a message from her phone saying, "Can you help Stan? I keep getting his missed calls." And immediately, Gabby's mother knows that something is off because Gabby never refers to her grandfather as Stan. It just didn't sound like her. It wasn't her. She just knew. And on August 30th, another text came in from Gabby saying no service in Yosemite. Yosemite in California, hundreds of miles away in the opposite direction of where they actually were. And that's when Nicole knew that something was off. She didn't have proof yet, but her motherly instincts kicked in and she just felt like something was wrong. After that, Brian ends up getting into Gabby's van, her van that's registered in her name, and he starts driving it towards Florida. And along the way, he even decides to use her debit card because why the hell not? And he withdraws over $1,000. And he even transfers $700 from her Venmo to himself because he's a loser. He also wrote on the Venmo note, "Goodbye, Brian, I'll never ask for anything again." And he literally wrote a goodbye note from her to himself, which is so crazy, using money that he fucking stole. Like, it's just, it's unbelievable, honestly. So on September 1st of 2021, Brian Laundrie ends up pulling into his parents' driveway. And he's back in Northport, Florida in Gabby's van, but without Gabby, which apparently his parents have no questions about, which is obviously suspicious. For the next 10 days, Brian Laundrie is sitting in his parents' house in Florida, and he apparently says nothing, even though his parents asked him multiple times, like, what happened, where Gabby is. You know, at this point, she's basically family to them as well. They are engaged and they've been living together. And just days after Brian returns home, Brian, his mom, his sister, and his dad go on a camping trip like everything is just normal. And meanwhile, at that time, Gabby's parents are starting to panic because they haven't heard anything from her and they don't know where she is. Gabby's mother is texting Gabby, no response. She's calling her, just goes straight to voicemail. And then she calls Brian, also goes straight to voicemail. She ends up reaching out to Brian's mother, Roberta. So Gabby's mother texts her and the message goes through, but she doesn't respond. So she tries again, and this time the message turns green, indicating that Roberta Laundrie had blocked Gabby's mother, which, what the fuck is wrong with you? Gabby's father, Joe, is reaching out as well. He texts Brian's parents. He's saying, "This is Gabby's dad. Have you heard from Brian or Gabby? Like, we're calling the police," and nothing, no response. Like, they literally just block him. I don't even know how to explain, first of all, how cold and evil that is, but also how stupid. Like, I just feel like, I mean, not that they probably ever intended on covering up their child's murder, as in, like, they didn't think about that before. Actually, we'll get into that in a second. But nonetheless, I don't think that they could have prepared themselves for it, but you'd think you would maybe try to show some concern and be like, I don't know where either of them are, or something. Like, if her parents call the police, then it just opens a new can of worms that your son literally killed this girl. Obviously, they're gonna find out. On September 11th, Nicole didn't have any other choice. At that point, she filed a missing persons report for Gabby, and the police end up going to the Laundrie house for a welfare check. And what happens next is one of the most uncomfortable interactions you will ever see. The officer knocks on the door. Chris Laundrie, Brian's father, answers the door, and it's just weird. Eventually, they end up confirming that Brian is in fact home, and the police are trying to figure out, like, when they last saw Gabby, why Gabby's van was in the driveway, etc. etc. And they're basically not answering any questions. They're refusing, and they won't cooperate with the cops, which is obviously pretty suspicious. And it's just so messed up that at this point, Gabby's parents are absolutely freaking out. And Brian is in that house knowing everything that happened, and I'm sure his parents knew too. And his parents are protecting him. And I'm just like, how do you do that as a parent to another parent? Like, I just think it's so fucked up. You just have to wait to hear what Roberta Laundrie put in writing to her son. I'm not exaggerating when I say it's one of the most disturbing letters I have ever read, and it's also like so incriminating that I cannot believe that the Laundries are like not in jail. So at this point, the case is everywhere. Everyone is talking about finding Gabby Petito. I'm sure you remember it was all over TikTok and social media in general. People really wanted to find her. Face was absolutely everywhere. And outside of the laundry house, there were people with signs and megaphones being like, where is Gabby? Because they knew that Brian was there. And everyone had the same question, and everyone kind of knew what had happened, but they just were waiting for Brian to confess. So a YouTube couple named Jen and Kyle Bethune, who ran this YouTube channel called Red, White, and Bethune, realized that they were traveling through that same area, Spread Creek, at the exact same time that Gabby disappeared. So they go back and check their dash cam footage, just reviewing it, and sure enough, they see Gabby's van, that white Ford Transit, just sitting there, and something about it feels immediately off, like it's been abandoned. They send the footage to the FBI, and that one clip narrows down the search area dramatically, and suddenly investigators knew exactly where to look. And on September 19th, 2021, unfortunately, they found Gabby's body about 900 feet away from where that van was parked on the dash cam footage. So quite literally, they really did help solve this case. She was wrapped up in a sweater and curled into the fetal position. Her hiking boots were placed beside her, and it was soon proven that it was Gabby, and the autopsy was performed. The cause of her death was a blunt force trauma to the head and neck combined with strangulation. So her death was ruled obviously a homicide, and the time of death was 3 to 4 weeks before she was found, which places it right around August 27th, the same day that she was seen at the restaurant, and like the one that Brian was causing a ruckus at. It is confirmed that Gabby was murdered and her body was found. Chris Laundrie, Brian's father, is seen outside mowing his lawn like nothing's happened. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And I just feel like that image, like, I don't understand what you were thinking in this scenario. Like, really not trying to help your case at all, or your kid's case, I guess. So by the time Gabby's body is found, Brian is already gone. He, on September 13th, 6 days before Gabby had been discovered, Brian tells his parents that he is going on a hike at the Carlton Reserve, which is a 25,000 acre swamp that's like almost impossible to search properly. He takes the family Mustang there and just disappears. And what's weird is that his parents don't report him missing. They wait 4 days to call 911. They call the police on September 17th, and by that point, the case is everywhere, and Gabby's name is national news, and people are demanding answers from him, and suddenly, the only person who knows what happened to Gabby is missing too. So the search begins. There's divers in the water, there's canine units, like, there are people trying to find Brian Laundrie in the swamp, and no one can find him for over a month. Like, he just vanished and no one's finding any remains or anything. There's lots of conspiracy theories that people claim that they saw Brian Laundrie during this time, but on October 20th, Chris and Roberta Laundrie say that suddenly they want to help with the search. They go directly to an area that had just been reopened after being flooded, and within hours they find something. So you're telling me that the police and canine units searched this swamp for a month and couldn't find anything, yet his parents come in, obviously not well versed in search and rescue, you know, and they just happen to find him. They happen to find items belonging to Brian, and shortly after that, the investigators end up finding his human remains nearby, and it all just felt a little too convenient for people. And a lot of people even have a conspiracy theory that he's not actually dead. I don't know. I go back and forth on it, but I do think his parents' behavior here is very strange. So on October 21st, the dental records confirm that it was Brian Laundrie, and his cause of death was a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his head. Next to his remains, they find a backpack, a revolver. In the notebook, he wrote, a confession, but at the end of the day, it really wasn't. And it wasn't released until January of 2022. The FBI was able to show what was inside the notebook. And Brian's so-called confession is absolutely not a confession. He writes this whole story about how Gabby supposedly got hurt during a hike and she was freezing and shivering in pain, and she begged him to end her suffering and begged him to kill her, which is obviously like nowhere near what happened based on the autopsy and evidence. So he's claiming he killed her out of mercy. He said, I ended her life. I thought it was merciful. That is what she wanted. A mercy killing is what he's trying to claim here, which is bananas. And it's just so fucked up because if he really is dead and he killed himself, why not just tell the truth of what happened? Why are you trying to make it seem like you're a good guy? I mean, like, maybe to help his family try and have a normal life after this, but like, girl, what's happening? What's happening here? And also, like, his entire timeline does not work with this story at all. Like, he went camping like nothing happened. If he was taking like the love of his life out of her misery and having a mercy kill because she got hurt in some way, don't you think that like he would have some sort of remorse instead of spending money on her credit card and Venmoing himself $700? Because what's up with that? Clearly this is bullshit. All right, now we have to talk about the letter that Brian Laundrie's mother wrote to Brian, because it is one of the most clear pieces of evidence to me that I do not understand how the hell there hasn't been more justice of this. Like, Gabby's parents ended up filing a civil lawsuit against Brian's parents, Chris and Roberta Laundrie, for intentional infliction of emotional distress. So what they're basically saying is you knew what happened and you helped him get away, while the entire public was begging to know what happened to this poor girl. And the letter is honestly very chilling to me, because I'm just like, how the hell did someone write this? It's so sick and twisted. But Roberta wrote to Brian in a letter labeled "Burn After Reading," which, what are we doing already? Like, what's up with that? Why do you got burn it after reading? Okay, this was before. Roberta Laundrie claims that this note was written before Gabby was killed, before they went on this trip, but obviously, like, the timing's just not adding up. That's can't be true. It can't be. The wording is too nuts. Roberta wrote to her son, "If you're in jail, I will bake a cake with a file in it." She continues, "If you need to dispose of a body, I will show up with a shovel and a garbage bag." I'm gonna let you sit with that for a second. If you need to dispose of a body, like, out of all things that you could say to your son, you choose that? Bananas. Bananas, bananas, bananas. And also on top of that, there's no way that this was written before Gabby went missing or before Gabby died, because why the fuck would she write that? If that was true, that's just like clearly a lie. So Roberta and her attorney claim that this was a joke, which it's a joke that's their claim, honestly, because what the fuck? Who makes a joke like that? They claim it was some sort of like family humor, and they tried to play it cool and said that it was written way long before any of this happened. But like, come on. Clearly that's not accurate. And also, it doesn't add up that they were acting the way that they were, because they were still blocking Gabby's parents and not answering any of the police's questions and hiding their son when their supposed future daughter-in-law is missing. And then that letter just happens to show up, and it's just a joke, just an inside joke with the fam. Crazy work by the Laundries, honestly. So in March of 2023, Gabby's family ended up reaching a $3 million wrongful death settlement against Brian Laundrie's estate. Now, realistically, there was not that kind of money in there, so it's not really about that. It's more like symbolic, like they weren't getting that kind of money, and the money that they did get went towards the Gabby Petito Foundation, helping other young women and raising awareness and trying to stop something like this from happening again. But as for Brian's parents, Chris and Roberta Laundrie have never been criminally charged with anything. They've never publicly explained anything, and they choose to stay silent in all of this and have yet to ever talk about anything going on here. So they live a pretty private life. Again, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that that Brian is still alive and they're hiding him somewhere. I don't know if I believe that, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this case. But that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of this case and what other cases do you want me to cover on this channel. But that is it, and I will see you all next week with another video. Bye!